There are days when you wake up after a long sleep, yet your mind still feels as heavy as stone. Your body is still there, your eyes still open to the world, but inside, you feel like a machine that has been running beyond its limits for years without ever truly resting. You try to continue living as if everything is normal. You still work, you still reply to messages, you still smile when you are supposed to smile, but day after day, you feel yourself being dragged down by something invisible that you cannot even name. It is not simply exhaustion. It is a mind overflowing with noise, a mind that has never truly known peace. We are living in an age where people fear silence more than anything else. The moment there is even a little emptiness, we immediately search for something to fill it. A video, a song, a meaningless conversation, a new headline, a notification on the phone. The brain is no longer allowed to rest. It is forced to think constantly, react constantly, compare constantly, and worry constantly. Even when the body lies down, the mind continues running like a lost traveler wandering through the darkness. Do you realize that you are no longer truly present in your own life? When you eat, you think about work. When you work, you think about the future. When you are beside the people you love, your thoughts still drift toward fears that have not even happened yet. And when night finally arrives, instead of resting, the mind opens thousands of invisible conversations, old memories, old regrets, old fears, things that should have been released long ago, but still remain like ghosts hidden inside the consciousness. That is why so many people feel completely drained, even though, from the outside, their lives appear perfectly fine, because the greatest destruction does not happen outside. It happens silently within the mind. According to Buddhist wisdom, suffering does not begin with circumstances. It begins with attachment within the mind. An untrained mind is like a restless monkey jumping endlessly from branch to branch, never remaining still. It pulls people away from reality and traps them inside endless chaos of thought. And the frightening part is that most of us have lived this way for so long that we mistake it for normal. We call overload hard work. We call anxiety responsibility. We call burnout maturity. But deep inside, the soul is slowly fading away. An overwhelmed brain does not only make you tired, it steals your ability to feel the beauty of life. You begin losing patience with small things. Simple conversations become irritating. A peaceful day suddenly feels empty. You no longer have enough energy to truly listen to others because your mind is already crowded with too many voices. And eventually there comes a moment when you look into the mirror and realize you have become a stranger to yourself. Not because life changed you too much, but because the mind was never healed. Buddhism teaches that the mind is the source of every state of existence. An anxious mind can turn the entire world into a prison, but a peaceful mind can turn even hardship into a place of refuge. The problem is that most modern people only try to repair the outer world without ever turning inward. They change jobs, change cities, change relationships, yet carry the same chaotic mind everywhere they go. And so suffering continues to repeat itself. Perhaps the most frightening thing is not that you are overwhelmed, but that you have become accustomed to it. You have become used to waking up with anxiety, used to checking your phone the moment your eyes open, used to a mind that never stops thinking, used to constantly needing to do something in order to feel valuable. And within that endless cycle, You slowly lose the ability to simply live, to live without running away, to live without constantly trying to prove yourself, to live without being dragged around by thousands of unnecessary thoughts. People often believe that happiness comes from having more money, more achievements, more recognition, but sometimes what truly saves a person is having less noise, less worrying, less comparison, less need to control everything. A lake can only reflect the sky when its surface is still, and the human mind is no different. When there is too much chaos inside, you can no longer see yourself clearly. Many people spend their entire lives chasing a better future without realizing that they are losing the present moment day by day. They always believe that once they overcome this stage, they will finally rest. But one pressure is followed by another. One goal is replaced by the next. Life becomes a long chain of postponed peace until the body finally speaks, until the soul becomes exhausted, until they no longer feel anything at all. That is when they begin to understand that the most valuable thing was never speed, but inner peace. Buddhism does not teach people to escape from life. It teaches people to look deeply into their own minds in order to understand why they suffer. And sometimes the answer is painfully simple, because we have never truly allowed ourselves to stop, never sat in stillness without searching for distraction, never listened to our own breath, never faced the loneliness inside, always trying to cover it with busyness. But the truth is this: the mind that is never allowed to rest eventually becomes the source of all suffering. It makes you react instead of understand. It makes you fearful instead of peaceful. It makes you live your entire life in tension without realizing that life was never meant to feel this heavy. And perhaps right now what you need is not to try harder, but to learn how to let go of the thoughts exhausting your mind. Let go of the need to control everything. Let go of the pressure to become someone perfect, because sometimes the moment life begins to heal is the moment the mind finally becomes silent. There is a truth that very few people dare to face. The human brain was not created to carry as much as the way we are living today. The mind is naturally like a still lake, but modern life has turned it into water that is constantly being disturbed. Every day, thousands of thoughts rush into your head like violent waves. Things that need to be done, bills that need to be paid, expectations that must be fulfilled, fears about the future, unhealed memories from the past. Everything piles on top of each other until even in silence there is still noise inside you, like a city that never sleeps. And the most heartbreaking part is that many people do not even realize they are slowly losing themselves. They believe that if they just keep trying a little harder, enduring a little longer, then everything will eventually be fine. But a tree stretched for too long will eventually break. A mind forced to function continuously will eventually become exhausted. There are people who still laugh and talk every day while feeling completely empty inside. There are people who appear very strong, but spend every night awake with thousands of thoughts racing through their minds. And there are people who think they are simply tired until one day they no longer feel joy in anything at all. That is when overload begins, destroying their lives in silence. It does not arrive like a violent storm. It comes very slowly, so slowly that you do not notice it. It begins when you lose the ability to enjoy simple things. A peaceful morning no longer feels comforting. A small conversation is enough to make you impatient. You begin reacting more, thinking more negatively, becoming more easily irritated. Even small things can make your emotions collapse, not because you are weak, but because your mind has been filled with too much pressure for too long. According to Buddhist wisdom, the deepest cause of suffering does not lie in the outside world, but in the mind that never agrees to stop. Human beings are constantly dragged around by desire, anxiety, and attachment. They believe that if they can control everything, they will find peace. But the more they try to control, the more afraid they become of losing. The more tightly they hold on, the more they suffer. And eventually, the mind becomes a battlefield without a single moment of rest. Have you noticed that most of our pain does not truly happen in the present moment? It comes from replaying the past or imagining the future. We suffer because of things that are already gone. We worry because of things that have not yet arrived. Meanwhile, the present moment, the only place where life truly exists, is forgotten. A person may be sitting in the middle of beautiful nature while their mind is filled with anxiety. A person may be beside their family while their thoughts remain trapped in work. A person may achieve great success and still feel empty inside, because when the mind is not at peace, nothing in the world is enough to fill the emptiness within. That is why many people feel more exhausted as they grow older, not because they have lived too little, but because they have thought too much. They carry everything inside their minds as if the mind were an endless storage room. But the truth is that every negative thought takes away a piece of your life energy. Every unnecessary worrying silently erodes your peace, and every time you force yourself to appear strong while falling apart inside, you push yourself even farther away from true healing. Buddhism teaches that the mind is like fire. If you do not know how to observe it, it will burn the person carrying it. We often believe suffering comes from other people, but many times it is the uncontrolled mind that hurts us the most. A sentence may only last a few seconds, but the mind can repeat it hundreds of times for many years. A failure may happen only once, but the fear of it can haunt an entire lifetime. And then people begin living in a constant state of defense. They fear being hurt, fear being judged, fear being abandoned, fear not being good enough. Those fears create endless no's inside the mind, preventing people from ever truly relaxing. Even when nothing is happening, the mind still creates hundreds of painful scenarios on its own. That is how an overloaded brain slowly destroys peace from within. What is sad is that today's society treats that condition as normal. People are proud of being busy, proud of working without rest, proud of always having too much to do. But very few realize that a life that is constantly full is not necessarily a meaningful life, because if the mind no longer has space to breathe, a person will slowly lose connection with their own soul. You begin living like a machine, waking up because of responsibility, working because of pressure, smiling because of habit, then going to sleep with an exhausted mind. Day after day, you continue existing, but no longer truly feel life anymore. And eventually, there comes a moment when you begin asking yourself, when did I lose my peace? Perhaps from the moment you stopped listening to yourself. Perhaps from the moment you kept trying to become the version others expected you to be. Perhaps from the moment you forgot that human beings do not need to be perfect in order to deserve love. Buddhism does not tell people to run away from the world. What the Buddha pointed out is that suffering will continue as long as the mind remains caught in ambition, fear, and attachment. One person may live in a noisy city while remaining peaceful inside. Meanwhile, another person may live in a quiet place while carrying storms within. Peace has never come from where you live. It comes from the state of your mind. And true healing begins when you allow yourself to slow down, not to give up on life, but to stop fighting against yourself. To sit quietly for a few minutes without needing to prove anything, to breathe without thinking about tomorrow, to understand that your value does not lie in how much you accomplish, but in whether your soul is still at peace. Because in the end, a ruined life does not always begin with a great tragedy. Sometimes it simply begins with a mind that has never truly been allowed to rest. There will come a day when you realize that what has been exhausting you was never only work, responsibilities, or the hardships out there in the world. What has truly been wearing you down is the endless battle happening inside your own mind, a battle you have silently endured for years without even realizing it. You try to become stronger, try harder, run faster, but the more you run, the farther your soul drifts from the peace it has always been searching for. There are people who spend their entire lives chasing success only to discover that they no longer know how to slow down. There are people who achieve everything society calls fulfillment, yet still lie awake every night with an emptiness they cannot explain. And there are people who have never truly rested, even though their bodies have stopped many times. Because true rest is not about allowing the body to lie down, it is about allowing the mind to be still. That is what the modern world is slowly forgetting. People learn how to make money, how to compete, how to impress others, but no one teaches them how to sit quietly with themselves. No one teaches them how to listen to their breathing. No one teaches them that an overloaded mind will drain all the color from life. No matter how perfect everything appears on the outside, and so people continue living disconnected from themselves. They wake up with anxiety, go to sleep with exhaustion. Each day passes like a race with no finish line. They no longer look at the sky as long as they once did. They no longer feel the wind against their skin. They no longer truly hear the laughter of the people they love. Their minds are always somewhere else, always running back to the past or rushing toward the future, while real life exists only in the present moment. Buddhism says that the greatest suffering of human beings is never being satisfied with the present. When they have little, they want more. When they finally achieve something, they become afraid of losing it. When peace appears, they become anxious because they fear it will not last. The mind continuously creates new waves, preventing people from ever truly resting. But look deeply into yourself. How long has it been since you were truly silent? Not the silence of a room, but the silence inside your head. How long has it been since you sat down without holding your phone, without searching for something to entertain yourself, without trying to distract yourself from your own emotions? We fear silence because, within silence, all the buried pain begins to appear. Unhealed wounds, suppressed pressure, tears that were never allowed to fall. And instead of facing them, people choose to keep themselves busy so they do not have to feel. But pain does not disappear simply because you ignore it. It only grows quietly in the dark until one day the mind can no longer endure it. Then you begin losing sleep, begin feeling that life is meaningless, begin feeling lonely even in the middle of a crowd, begin feeling exhausted even when you have done nothing physically demanding. That is when the soul is trying to tell you, stop, not stop living, but stop hurting yourself with endless thoughts. There is something deeply ironic about life. People always think they need more strength in order to overcome suffering. But sometimes what heals them is not strength, but letting go. Letting go of the need to control everything. Letting go of the need to be perfect. Letting go of the obsession with being recognized. Letting go of the expectations that have never allowed the mind to rest. Because the truth is, you do not need to become someone else in order to find peace. You only need to return to yourself. A peaceful mind does not come from having a perfect life. It comes from no longer fighting against the things you cannot control. The Buddha once taught that holding a hot piece of coal in order to throw it at someone else only burns your own hand first. And many people live exactly like that every single day. They hold on to old anger, old regrets, old pain, then wonder why they cannot be happy. But how can a mind filled with wounds see the beauty of life? How can a heart that is always tense feel peace? We often believe that life is against us, but many times it is our way of thinking that is pulling us downward. An overloaded brain turns small things into enormous problems, turns careless words into deep wounds, turns a future that has not happened into endless fear. And gradually, people no longer live in reality. They live inside their thoughts. What is sad is that most people only realize this when it is already too late, when their health begins collapsing, when their relationships begin breaking apart, when they no longer recognize themselves in the mirror, when their hearts no longer feel joy in anything at all. But perhaps if you are hearing these words right now, then it is not too late yet. Perhaps life has made you tired. Perhaps you have carried too much pressure for too long. Perhaps there are storms inside you that no one else can see. But healing always begins the moment a person is willing to look back into their own mind, not to blame themselves, not to feel ashamed, but to understand that you are only a human being who has been trying for too long, to understand that you do not need to be strong all the time, to understand that peace is not in the future, but in the way you face the present. Maybe today you cannot change your entire life, but you can begin with one slower breath, one evening where your mind is not consumed by the screen of your phone, one quiet moment to listen to yourself, one act of forgiving yourself for not being perfect. That is how peace returns, not loudly, not violently, but gently, like light entering a dark room that has been closed for far too long. Then you will understand that life never required you to run so fast. The world may constantly pressure you to become more, better, more successful, but the soul asks for only one small thing: to live in peace, to wake up without feeling the weight inside the mind, to smile without pretending to be okay, to live a day without being dragged away by thousands of thoughts, and perhaps that is the greatest success a human being can ever achieve. Not wealth, not fame, not recognition from the entire world, but the ability to keep inner stillness in the middle of a noisy world. Because in the end, when everything in this life changes, when youth fades away, when the things that once made you anxious no longer matter, what remains deepest of all is still the state of your soul. A peaceful mind can turn an ordinary life into heaven, but a chaotic mind can turn the entire world into hell. So before it is too late, learn how to rest not only with your body, but also with your soul. Give yourself the right to slow down, the right to be silent, the right to heal. and the right to live more lightly. Because sometimes what saves your life is not trying one more time, but finally learning how to let go of the things that have been silently destroying you from within.